According to sources, the 30-man provisional roster has been announced for Team Melli. For today's episode, this is part one of our analysis of Iran's provisional 30-man roster. You know the deal, and you know what time it is. It's time for Team Melli Talk. Carlos Queiroz has some big decisions to make. Hey everyone, welcome back to Team Melli Talk. For today's episode, we will be taking a look at the provisional list of goalkeepers and defenders that have been called up by head coach Carlos Queiroz, according to Iranian source Varzesh. Let's get started. We are starting with the goalkeepers. And first, I must say that I'm a little surprised because Carlos Queiroz has decided to call up 5 goalkeepers. But first, joining us for today's episode, my good friend, Dara Zarandi.
Dara, as always, great to have you on the show. How you doing?
Hey Art, thanks for having me back on. Always a pleasure.
All right, let's not waste any time. The 5 goalkeepers are Ali Reza Behranvand, Amir Abedzadeh, Hossein Hosseini, Mohammad Reza Akhbari, and Payam Niyazmand.
Now, in your honest opinion, Dara, when you hear that there's 5 goalkeepers that were called up, like we said, assuming that this is the truth, what is your reaction to hearing the number of 5 goalkeepers?
Yeah, I think whenever you look at like the provisional rosters for any major tournament, be it a continental tournament or the World Cup, most of the times there's 4, sometimes there is 5. It is pretty rare probably to see the 5. What that just says to me though is that it's probably a pretty tight competition. I would say probably anything after Ali Reza Behranvand, so the second and third choice options, that there's a pretty tight competition going on between those 4 goalkeepers. So I think that's really all that it indicates.
Now, in your opinion, do you think that Mohammad Reza Akhbari or Payam Niyazmand actually have a chance of making this roster?
Yeah, I think the indication that like we can all take from there being 5 goalies again is the fact that it's just a really tight list. And to be honest, based on their performances this season so far, it makes sense. They're all really solid goalkeepers. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. So I think Queiroz and the staff just really want to take their time with evaluating what those strengths and weaknesses are with as much time as they have.
I'm just all along saying that, especially on the previous episode of Team Melli Talk, I said that the 3 goalkeepers are Behranvand, Abedzadeh, and Hossein Hosseini. I feel like those 3, hands down, those are the top 3. I could not imagine it being any more different. I'm not trying to get you to agree with me, but if you actually were thinking maybe one of those other 2 has a chance, who would you choose, Niyazmand or Akhbari?
It's a real toss-up. I first want to say that I agree with you on your prediction of the 3 goalies. Between Akhbari and Niyazmand, I think I would probably go with Niyazmand just because he's a little bit younger. And I know Queiroz, when it comes to his squad selections, he always opts to go for, I shouldn't say always, but in certain scenarios, he definitely opts to go for youth and building for the future. He did that with pretty much every single roster that he came out with before a major tournament. So I would say if you're aligning them from an overall skill set standpoint, they're pretty similar level. Niyazmand just has the upper hand in being that he's younger, also has a little bit of European experience as well. So those things, I guess, give him a little bit of an edge over Akhbari.
Now it is time for the center backs. Some familiar names and maybe a couple surprises. Dara, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, the center backs are Mortaza Pourali Ganji, Hossein Kenani, Shoja Khaliazadeh, Majid Hosseini, Ruzbe Cheshmi, and Saman Fallah.
Now, from all those names I just mentioned, are any, of course, besides the big 4 that we expect, are you surprised at all to hear the name of Ruzbe Cheshmi or Saman Fallah?
No, I'm not. And the reason is because for Ruzbe Cheshmi, he was actually a starter under Queiroz for a little bit. He was starting to become a starter right before he got that injury in the game versus Morocco. So that was the opening game of a World Cup that he got the starting spot, initially over Majid Hosseini. So they obviously have some history together, working together, Cheshmi and Queiroz. So that definitely plays in his favor. Of course, he probably isn't as sharp as he was at that point in time in his career. So Queiroz does go for experienced players. So not really surprised to see him there. And then Salman Falla, a good young prospect to have in the center back position. He's been a really strong asset for Paycon and also for the youth national teams. So also not really surprised to see him because, again, if you're looking for a younger prospect that can potentially take their next step in their career and use the World Cup as an opportunity to really make a name for themselves, it would be him. He's the most skilled young center back in Iran. So it's good to see that he's getting an opportunity so far by being included in these preliminary camps.
In all honesty, I feel like there are going to be a lot of Team Melli fans that aren't too thrilled. Like I said, assuming all this is correct and accurate, I think a lot of Team Melli fans probably aren't too thrilled to see Ruzbeh Cheshmi there because I feel like they just want to see that continuity of Pourali Ganji, Kanani, Khalilzadeh, and Majid Hosseini. Those four are known to be like, the big four center backs.
Yeah, that's true. I think the difference with Ruzbeh Cheshmi is also that he has a lot of experience playing as a defensive midfielder too. And we all know, again, just considering what Queiroz likes, he loves those utility guys. So in a way, Cheshmi can kind of be somewhat of a utility guy in that he can be a defensive midfielder or he can be a center back. So I think that will play to his advantage when Queiroz is coming down to making his final cuts.
Okay, similar to the center backs, Carlos Queiroz has also called up 6 wing backs. Here they are: Ehsan Hajsafi, Milad Mohammadi, Omid Nurafkan, Abul Fazl Jalali, Ramin Rezaian, and Sadek Moharami.
All right, Dara, you heard the names. You're able to count those numbers. Right now, there's not a guessing game involving the right back position because let's focus on the right back first. The 2 players I mentioned, Ramin Rezaian and Sadek Moharami. Those are 2 right backs. So that means, like we said, like I said, if this list is accurate, then that means those are the 2 right backs, and neither of them will be cut. But are you thrilled though to hear the names Sadek Moharami and Ramin Rezaian?
Yes, I am. I think they both offer different things. Their strengths are similar. Their weaknesses are a little bit different, but also, again, somewhat similar as well. With Sadek, I think we have somebody who's going to be able to go forward really well and connect with the other wingers on the flank, Jahan Bakhsh, Holizadeh, any of the other technical players. He works really well with them. We've seen that in previous games for Iran. So I would say him and utilizing him in his crossing abilities as well through counterattacks. That's something that we've seen him kind of take his game to the next level on in the Champions League this year and in the Croatian domestic league as well. So with Rezaian, I think that his biggest asset is also crossing and kind of getting forward on counterattacks. I think Sadek does that a lot better. So I think that he gets the edge over Rezaian for that specific reason. And then when kind of looking at their weaknesses, for Sadek, it is definitely kind of going one-on-one with quick and very technical wingers and forwards. We saw him kind of struggle for the national team during World Cup qualification. The good news is it looks like he has actually made a little bit of improvement in his weak area, just seeing how he has done with the likes of Rafael Leao, for example, in the Champions League. So a little bit more optimistic about him to rectify his weakness. With Rezaian, I would say that he also has that same weakness, but for him, it's actually, I think, a lot more mental. We've seen him kind of have mental lapses. If you look at that game again against Japan, where we lost 3-0, that first goal that they cracked the back of the net was really just a mental lapse in our defense, and it started with Rezayan completely losing focus. So I think for him that's kind of a huge setback, and he hasn't really gotten much better since then, not just in that department but really kind of his overall game as a whole. His age has really showed. He isn't quite as sharp of a player as he was in 2018, so big difference between the two guys and really where they're at in their careers and their current form.
Looking back at the other coaches, before Carlos Queiroz returned, there was always, a lot of Team Melli fans saying that Ramin Rezayan should have been in the lineup. And, I don't recall, obviously, Dragan Skocic calling up Ramin Rezayan. And I just think, when seeing Rezayan on this list, I think that pretty much shows that Carlos Queiroz just does not have faith in some of the other right backs. I think he looks at them as being way too inexperienced. And I think he just wants to, go take the safe bet.
Yeah. I would also say, just on the subject of right backs, is to also keep in mind that Shoja Khalizadeh can play as a right back as well. We saw in the QSL he was used there a lot by his team, and then in addition to that, even Hossein Kanoni, he also can be used as a right back in an emergency situation if it was needed. Kind of technical, he has some decent technical ability for a center back for sure. Also definitely a little bit quicker on his feet than I would even say Shoja Khalizadeh. So overall, if the emergency came about and we needed someone to cover the right flank, I think both could do a decent job as well. And my personal prediction, I also think that Ramin Rezayan will get cut, and that will kind of be Queiroz's game plan, is to utilize Moharami as a right back, and then if needed, go to one of those two guys to cover the right flank.
A very bold prediction. I really like that. Awesome. Okay, from my point of view, I'm not going to be predicting that Rezayan gets cut, but let's just wait and see. Now, talking about the left backs, I pretty much said 4 players, but let's also not forget that Ehsan Hashsafi, well, he's definitely as utility as they come. He can play not just as a left back, he can play as a winger, also as a defensive midfielder. But let's hope that does not happen in the World Cup. So those left backs, of course, Ehsan Hashsafi, Milad Mohammadi, Omid Nurafkan, and Abul Fazl Jalali. Now, from these left backs, what have you got to say about them?
Yeah, I think the most interesting one for me is Abul Fazl Jalali. Young raw talent right out of the Persian Gulf Premier League, and he has, in his limited action that he's gotten with the national team, I believe it's been like 2 or 3 friendlies so far. In all the game time he's gotten, he's actually shown really strong performances. He has a mature game beyond his years, I would say, in that he knows how to play the left back position well. He covers quite a bit of ground, knows when to get forward, when to stay back. I think that's something a lot of the attacking minded left backs get stuck in, and that's actually something that I think he's done very well in his Team Melli caps. So for me, he's the most interesting one. The weakest link for me is pretty easy. I think it's without question Omid Nurafkan, who had some really shocking performances, I would say, in the World Cup qualification, with just really how easily he was getting beat against really weak opposition too. Like, we're talking about teams that struggle to get points out of Asia, like the Iraq national team or UAE, Syria. These teams that you wouldn't expect when somebody's going one-on-one with, that they would struggle as much as he did. So he was caught out of position a lot. He's just not really strong defensively. He's not, his overall awareness of where to be on the field in certain situations, just again, he's been caught sleeping on so many of those scenarios. So ultimately, I think he's the weakest link of the group.
The one thing I want to share about this is that a lot of people know that Milad Mohammadi has not been on top of his game. We know that, but I'm just hoping that he will find a way to play really hard and return to that form that we saw at the 2018 World Cup. At times he looked like a tank, not afraid to go into any challenge. I just think he needs to, bring up his confidence. Like I said, I'm not spending time with him. I'm watching, I'm not watching every single step he takes, playing for AEK Athens. But we know something has not been right. I'm just hoping that he finds a way to right the ship, because I'd rather see him play at left back instead of Ehsan Hajsafi. But of course, obviously, the person who's in better form and the person who's more match fit will be playing.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Of course, because the two of them, Ehsan Hajsafi and Milad Mohammadi, are teammates on the club level and competing for the same position at AEK Athens. It's actually interesting to note that in the last 4 to 5 weeks, Milad Mohammadi has actually taken back the starting spot from Ehsan Hajsafi, who had started the season as the first choice left back. So he actually is kind of picking up momentum at the right time. And his ratings that he's been getting from all sorts of sites and also the AEK fans themselves have been quite good. He's done pretty well defensively, which has always been an area where he has been inconsistent in. Sometimes he was showing really good defensive performances in Europa League at Gent, and then also again from an attacking perspective, had his weaknesses not being the best with his weak foot, but also being a kind of streaky crosser. At times he would be putting in lots of dangerous balls, and other times he'd be putting in a lot of aimless ones. So overall with him, it's quite obvious that his biggest struggle was always just finding consistency. So he has finally, I think, for the first time in quite a while, put together a string of 4 or 5 good performances. So hopefully he just builds off of that in the last couple of weeks and can go into the World Cup, in top form or as close to top form as he could be in.
We are just about to wrap up this edition of Team Melli Talk, but first we must decide which players should be cut. And as we know, the source indicates that Carlos Queiroz has called up 30 players as part of this provisional roster. But of course, at the 2022 World Cup, each national team can only bring a maximum of 26 players.
So Dara, based on all the players we've been talking about today, when I look at the fact that there are 5 goalkeepers and then 6 wingbacks and 6 center backs, this is really, I think we could pretty much say that if there's going to be whoever's going to be cut, I think they're all going to come from the goalkeeper and defender positions. I obviously could be wrong. I can't see the future. Neither can you. None of us can. But let's just assume that the cuts are only coming from the goalkeeper position and defenders. That means that all the wingers, defensive midfielders, and attacking midfielders are staying. And of course, same thing with the strikers. Well, actually, that number is technically at 3. I'm not happy about that, but we're not talking about that this episode. So let's just say that, you and I can choose our 4 players. Earlier you said that you believe that Ramin Rezaian would be cut. So if you think he would be cut, who are your other 3 players to cut from the selection of goalkeepers and defenders that we've talked about?
Yeah, I think for me, who I would like kind of to see cut and who will get cut are 2 different things. I think who will get cut will be, let's go with Rezaian at right back. I'll go with Abulfaz Jalali at left back. And then the 2 goalies that I think will get cut are Akhbari and Niazmand. The only thing that is different in what I would personally do from those 4 is swap out Jalali for Nuraf Khan. Personally, for me, I don't see any use that Nuraf Khan can serve. And given his, again, shocking performances, I would cut him.
All right, based on everything you just said, I need to piggyback a little bit on what you just said. Because anyone who's been watching Team Melli Talk for a while knows that I have been very, very anti-Ehsan Hajsafi. But, ever since that game where Iran lost a 2-1 friendly to Algeria, I pretty much had to put Omid Nuraf Khan above Ehsan Hajsafi in terms of, which player I'm just so against. I don't know why this person even gets invited to the national team. So if I'm going to choose my 4 players to get cut, yes, same thing with you and the goalkeepers in Akhbari and Niazman, because, take 3 goalkeepers to a World Cup. I just cannot see that number being 4, obviously not 5. And as for the players to be cut, I'm going to have to go with Saman Falah because he's uncapped. He's a very young center back. I know he's very talented, but I see him getting cut, and the other person, I'm hoping it would be Omid Nurafkan, because I like the way Abul Fazl Jalali played against Uruguay. I like what he brings to the team. Yes, I know he's not that experienced, but Omid Nurafkan to me is just a strange call up all the time. I mean, yes, I know he can play left back. They say he can, supposedly he can also even play center back. But playing center back or left back, he's such a liability, and there's not much more really to add to that.
100% agreed. He got caught sleeping on, not just again for the national team. He got caught sleeping for Sepahan, both in the league and in the Asian Champions League. So again, if you take all these levels of competition where he hasn't been able to not just show consistent good performances, but has really gotten lit up and torched, I don't see the purpose that he serves either.
Dara, just want to thank you for taking the time to join me on Team Melli Talk. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Art.
Now, to show my appreciation, Dara, are you interested in some Team Melli merch?
Always.
Well, it looks like you got a scarf coming your way. I know this will be with you whenever you're watching Iran during the 2022 World Cup. I hope you enjoy this.
Thank you, Art. You're a legend.
And to all our viewers, if you are planning on attending the 2022 World Cup in Qatar and you would like some Team Melli merch, such as this scarf, make sure to find us on social media, or you could send us an email, teammellitalk@gmail.com. And even if you're not planning to attend the World Cup, this scarf makes for a great gift. Thank you again, everybody, for watching this edition of Team Melli Talk. As always, really do appreciate the support. Make sure you get to our website, www.teammellitalk.com. Remember, this is your best source for the latest news on Team Melli, the national team of Iran. Make sure you find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You know the handle, @Team Melli Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit that notification button. See you on the next edition of Team Melli Talk.